some nights it's not that anything is wrong, nothing urgent happened, nothing is demanding your attention, and yet you're still awake, not because your mind is loud, but because it's still working, still turning things over, still trying to understand, understanding what today was about, understanding why certain moments stayed with you, understanding what this feeling is and where it came from. It's quiet now, but inside something keeps asking for meaning. There's no need to stop that effort right away. You don't have to push the thoughts away. You don't have to calm them down. Just notice them. Notice how gently and sometimes stubbornly the mind keeps reaching for explanation, as if understanding were the last task left unfinished, as if rest had to wait until everything made sense. Tonight isn't asking you to solve anything. It's only offering you a place to pause. You can let the questions be here. You don't need to answer them. You don't even need to hold on to them. Just let them sit, the way objects sit in a dim room when no one is looking directly at them. Nothing needs to be decided yet. Nothing needs to be named. You are allowed to arrive exactly as you are, with a mind that still wants to know, and a body that is already tired of knowing. Take a slow breath, not to relax, just to arrive. And if understanding is still moving in the background, that's all right. For now, we're only noticing that it's there. You might notice how familiar this is, this moment between the day and sleep. The lights are low. The world has already moved on without you, and still the mind stays behind, looking back at what just passed. It reviews small things, a sentence, a tone of voice, something that didn't land the way you expected. It's not trying to be difficult. It's trying to be careful, trying to make sure nothing important was missed. But night doesn't ask for that kind of care. Night doesn't need a summary. It doesn't need conclusions or explanations. It doesn't ask you to understand what today meant. It only asks that you be here in this quieter space where effort can soften without disappearing. If the mind reaches again, let it reach. You don't have to follow it. You don't have to finish what it starts. Thoughts can drift like unfinished sentences, losing their shape before they ever need an ending. You are not behind. Nothing has been left undone. For this moment, being here is already enough. Let the body settle in its own way. Let the mind continue or slow or pause. Any of those is fine. You've arrived, even if understanding hasn't. During the day, understanding is useful. It helps you move, decide, respond. Explaining things keeps the world running smoothly. It gives shape to events. It turns experience into something manageable, but at night that same effort can begin to feel heavy. The mind keeps explaining, even when there's nothing left that needs to be done. It explains why you reacted the way you did, why someone else didn't, why a moment stayed with you longer than it should have. Each explanation feels small, reasonable, almost harmless, and yet one by one they start to pile up. Understanding becomes something you carry rather than something that supports you. You might notice how every thought asks for a reason. Every feeling wants a cause. Every memory wants to be placed somewhere, as if rest were only allowed after everything has been properly sorted. But night isn't a place for sorting. It's a place where explanations naturally lose their grip, where cause and effect grow less sharp, where things are allowed to be unfinished. You don't have to stop explaining. That would only create more effort. Instead, notice the weight of it. Notice how each explanation asks for a little more energy, a little more attention, a little more clarity, and how tired that makes you feel. There is nothing wrong with understanding. It has its place. This just isn't it. For now, you can let explanations rest where they are. They don't need to be completed. They don't need to be corrected. They can wait. You may feel it in the body first before the mind notices it. A subtle tightness, a sense of holding something slightly too carefully. The effort of understanding doesn't always feel like thinking. Sometimes it feels like staying alert, like keeping watch over something that already happened. The mind says it's only being responsible, that it's trying to learn, trying not to repeat mistakes, trying to make sense of patterns, and during the day that can be helpful. But here, in the quiet of night, the same movement keeps the body awake. Each explanation keeps a small light on inside, not bright enough to see clearly, but bright enough to prevent rest. You might notice how explanations rarely come alone. One thought gently calls the next. One reason opens the door to another possibility, and soon the mind is standing in a room full of unfinished meanings, none of them urgent, none of them dangerous, just present. Night doesn't ask you to clear that room. It doesn't require you to organize what's there. It doesn't need you to decide which explanation is correct. It simply allows the lights to dim on their own. You can let the mind keep its explanations without carrying them. They can stay where they are, quietly incomplete. Nothing bad happens when an explanation is left unfinished overnight. Tomorrow can hold them again if it needs to, but this moment doesn't. Right now, the body knows how to rest without understanding. Breathing happens without explanation. The weight of the bed supports you without needing meaning. You don't have to make sense of anything to let that support be there. There are moments in life that don't ask to be understood. They happen quietly. They pass without explanation. Not everything arrives with a message. Not every feeling is pointing somewhere. Some experiences are simply what they are. During the day, it can feel important to decide what things mean. Meaning gives direction. It gives shape to memory. It helps the mind feel oriented. But night works differently. At night, meaning isn't required for safety. Nothing needs to be learned. Nothing needs to be carried forward. A moment doesn't lose its value just because you don't know what it meant. You may notice how often the mind asks, "What does this say about me? What am I supposed to take from this?" Those questions come from a wish to stay balanced, to stay prepared, to stay in control. But here, control can soften. The night doesn't test you. It doesn't measure insight or understanding. It doesn't expect you to take something away. You're allowed to let experience pass through you without turning it into a lesson. A sound doesn't need meaning to fade. A breath doesn't need interpretation to deepen. Sleep doesn't need a reason to arrive. If the mind reaches for meaning again, let it do so gently. There's no need to answer. Meaning can wait. It always can. For now, you're resting in a space where nothing is being asked of you. You may notice how unfamiliar this feels at first. This idea that nothing is being asked of you. The mind is so used to turning experience into something useful, something that can be stored or explained, that resting without meaning can feel slightly unsteady, like standing in a space without labels. But that unsteadiness isn't danger. It's simply the absence of effort. Meaning is something the mind creates to orient itself in the world, and most of the time, that's helpful. It tells you where you've been, what mattered, what to avoid next time. It helps you feel continuous, like today connects cleanly to yesterday. Yet there are times when that continuity can rest. Times when nothing needs to be added to the story of who you are or what this day was for. Night is one of those times. Here, experience doesn't need to turn into memory right away. Feelings don't need to become information. Moments don't need to justify themselves by pointing toward some future understanding. You can let the day remain slightly unfinished, not unresolved in a painful way, just gently open like a book left face down, knowing it can be picked up again if needed. The mind may still reach for meaning out of habit. That's natural. You don't have to correct it or stop it. You can let those questions drift past without answering them, the way background sounds drift through a room while you rest. They don't require attention to exist, and they don't require action to fade. Nothing bad happens when meaning is postponed. Nothing falls apart. The body continues to breathe. The night continues to hold you. Sleep doesn't arrive because something made sense. It arrives when effort loosens enough for the body to take over. And right now, meaning can step aside, not forever, just for this stretch of quiet time where being here is already sufficient. Not everything meaningful announces itself. Some changes arrive without sound, without emphasis, without any clear moment you could point to and say, this is when it happened. We often expect important things to feel obvious. We imagine that if something truly matters, it should stand out, feel intense, or arrive with a sense of certainty. But many of the most real shifts don't work that way. They happen quietly. A thought loses its urgency without you noticing when. A feeling softens without explanation. Something that once felt heavy simply stops asking for attention. Nothing dramatic occurs. Nothing needs to be understood. The mind is used to looking for events that can be named, moments that can be traced, explained, or placed in a clear sequence. But there are changes that don't follow that pattern, changes that happen in the background, like light slowly shifting across a room while you're focused elsewhere. Night is full of these quiet events. Sleep itself is one of them. There is no single instant when you can say, now I am asleep. The effort fades, awareness loosens, and the body takes over without announcing its arrival. You don't understand your way into sleep. You drift into it. In the same way, rest doesn't come from insight. It comes from allowing things to remain unfinished. You may notice that nothing here is asking you to believe in anything unusual. There is no need to expect something special to happen. The quiet events of the night don't require faith or attention. They happen whether you watch them or not. A muscle releases a little. Breathing deepens on its own. The space between thoughts grows, not because you made it grow, but because it was no longer being filled. These are not moments the mind needs to capture. If you try to notice them too closely, they tend to disappear, not because they were fragile, but because they were never meant to be held. They are like changes in temperature or the feeling of weight settling evenly across the body, things that are felt more clearly when you stop checking for them. The mind sometimes wants rest to arrive as a clear signal, something it can recognize and confirm. But the night doesn't work that way. It doesn't offer proof. It doesn't provide milestones. It simply continues. And in that continuation, small shifts accumulate without being recorded. Tension eases a fraction at a time. The need to understand loses its grip, not because it was answered, but because it no longer feels necessary. Nothing has to happen all at once. Nothing needs to be completed. You can let the night carry these quiet changes forward at its own pace without asking where they are going or what they mean. They don't need direction. Even now, something may already be shifting beneath awareness, not in a way you can track, not in a way that demands attention, but in a way that supports rest simply by continuing. You don't have to watch for it. You don't have to cooperate. Quiet events don't need permission. They happen in the spaces where effort has loosened, where understanding has stepped aside, and where nothing is being asked of you except to remain here, supported by the night as it moves forward without interruption. There is a quiet assumption many of us carry into the night, even without realizing it. The idea that if something remains unclear, we must have missed something important, that not knowing means falling behind or failing to understand what should have been understood by now. During the day, knowing feels like safety. It helps you navigate conversations, decisions, responsibilities. It gives a sense of competence, of being oriented in the world. So when understanding doesn't arrive, the mind often treats it as a problem, something unfinished, something that needs correction. But not knowing is not a mistake. There are many things in life that were never meant to be fully understood, at least not all at once, and certainly not on demand. Some experiences don't resolve into clear explanations. Some feelings don't point to a single cause. Some moments don't offer a lesson that can be named and stored, and that doesn't mean anything has gone wrong. Think of how sleep worked before you ever learned to think about it. There was no strategy, no analysis, no requirement to explain what you were feeling before rest could begin. The body knew what to do without instruction, and it still does. Not knowing in this sense is not a lack. It is a natural state the body recognizes as safe, a state where vigilance can soften because nothing is being demanded. The mind may still want to check, to make sure there isn't something important being overlooked. That impulse comes from care, not from error. You don't need to push it away, but you also don't need to obey it. Here, you are allowed to leave questions unanswered without consequence. Nothing needs to be concluded. Nothing needs to be resolved before rest is permitted. The night doesn't reward insight. It doesn't punish uncertainty. It simply holds you whether you understand or not. You can let yourself rest in that neutrality, not knowing without tension, not knowing without urgency. If a question appears, it can remain open. If a thought trails off without finishing, it can fade without being completed. There is no test you are failing by letting that happen. Right now, not knowing is simply another way of being present, one that requires less effort than trying to make sense of everything before letting go. And that easing of effort, more than understanding, is what allows rest to arrive. At some point, the effort to understand begins to change, not because anything was solved and not because the right explanation finally appeared, but because the need itself starts to lose its urgency. The mind may still move, but it moves more slowly now. Thoughts pass without insisting on completion. Questions appear without demanding answers. You don't have to make that happen. It's something that unfolds on its own when there is nothing left to prove. Understanding has a certain tension to it, a forward pull, a subtle pressure that says something must be clarified before rest is allowed. And as that pressure softens, the body notices first. The shoulders settle a little more into their weight. Breathing deepens without instruction. The space around each thought grows wider, less crowded. You might still hear the mind asking familiar questions. That's fine. They can drift by without being followed. There is no need to finish them, no need to respond. The night is not waiting for an explanation. It is already here, holding everything exactly as it is. As the need to understand loosens, attention begins to spread instead of focus. It no longer gathers tightly around one thought or one feeling. It rests more evenly, like light softening across a surface rather than concentrating in one place. Nothing important is being lost in this widening. Understanding is not disappearing forever. It's simply stepping back, the way effort naturally does when it's no longer required. You may notice small pauses between thoughts now, moments where nothing in particular is happening. Those pauses don't need to be filled. They are not gaps in awareness. They are signs that awareness no longer has to work so hard. If a thought forms, it can dissolve again without being completed. If a feeling passes through, it doesn't need to be named. You are allowed to rest without resolution, without clarity, without knowing what this moment means. The need to understand can soften further, the way muscles release when they realize they no longer have to hold anything in place. And as that need fades into the background, something else becomes possible. Rest without effort, awareness without strain, being here without asking why. You may notice that the urge to understand no longer feels as sharp as it did earlier. It hasn't vanished, but it doesn't pull as strongly. It's there in the background now, like a sound you no longer need to identify. The mind doesn't have to be silent for this to happen. Thoughts can still appear. They simply don't carry the same weight. There is less insistence in them, less pressure to arrive somewhere specific. Understanding begins to feel optional rather than necessary. Something you could return to later if you wished, but not something that needs attention right now. This softening isn't something you do on purpose. It happens when effort realizes it can rest. You might feel it as a gentle spreading out of attention. Instead of narrowing toward a single thought, awareness widens and becomes less focused, more receptive, less concerned with details. The body responds to this shift quietly. Muscles release without instruction. Breathing becomes slower, deeper, more regular on its own. Nothing is being solved. Nothing is being decided. And because of that, there is nothing to protect. The need to understand was once a way of staying alert, of making sure things were under control. Now control is no longer required. You don't have to monitor what the mind is doing. You don't have to check whether you are resting correctly. Even the idea of letting go can be allowed to loosen. Rest doesn't depend on technique. It doesn't depend on insight. It comes when effort steps aside long enough for the body to take over the way it always has. You can allow that process to continue at its own pace. Nothing needs to be rushed. Nothing needs to be completed before the next moment arrives. Understanding can remain soft, distant, unimportant for now. And in that softness, rest deepens naturally, without instruction, without explanation, without asking anything more of you. There is a kind of rest that doesn't come from understanding anything at all. It arrives when meaning steps aside, when the mind no longer feels responsible for explaining what is happening or why it matters. You don't need a reason to rest. The body doesn't ask for one. Breathing continues without interpretation. The weight of your body settles without explanation. Sleep begins to gather, not because something made sense, but because effort has eased enough for it to do so. Meaning is something the mind uses to organize experience. It helps during the day when decisions and actions depend on it. But here, in the quiet stretch of night, meaning can become unnecessary. Nothing is asking to be learned. Nothing is asking to be carried forward. You may notice how different this feels from earlier in the night. Thoughts still appear, but they no longer form a story that needs to be followed. They rise and fade like background movement, without direction, without purpose. There is no need to hold on to them. There is no need to push them away. Rest does not require participation. The mind can drift in and out of attention. Awareness can soften without disappearing. The body can remain present while effort continues to dissolve. You are not missing anything by resting this way. Nothing important depends on your attention right now. Meaning will still be there later if it's needed. Understanding will still be available when the day returns. For now there is only this simple state of being supported. The surface beneath you holding your weight, the air moving in and out without instruction. Even the sense of time can begin to blur here. Moments don't need to be counted. Nothing is moving toward a conclusion. You can allow rest to continue without direction, without expectation, without any requirement to notice what is happening next. Sleep does not ask for meaning. It does not arrive as a result. It comes when nothing else is being demanded. And right now, nothing is. You may notice that without meaning, time begins to feel less structured. Moments no longer line up in a clear sequence. There is less sense of before and after, and more of a continuous, gentle presence. This can feel unfamiliar at first. The mind is used to marking progress, noticing change, keeping track of where it is. But here, none of that is required. Nothing needs to move forward. Nothing needs to arrive. For now, nothing needs to change, and nothing needs to be decided as this quiet continues in its own way, without asking anything of you, without expecting movement or progress, simply remaining as it is. There is no point you need to reach from here, no moment you need to notice or mark, only this steady sense of being supported, held in place by the night itself, without effort, without instruction. Rest doesn't have to deepen, and it doesn't have to stop. It can continue exactly like this, neither increasing nor fading, just unfolding gently, moment by moment, without direction. The body already understands this kind of rest. It settles into it without checking, without evaluating whether anything is happening the right way, allowing weight to distribute evenly, allowing breath to move in its own rhythm, slow or slower, without needing attention. Thoughts may still appear from time to time. They can pass through without being followed, without being completed, like distant movement that doesn't ask you to turn your head toward it. Nothing here needs to be carried forward. Nothing needs to be held in mind. The quiet doesn't require your participation. It doesn't need you to stay awake for it, and it doesn't mind if attention drifts, softens, or slips away for a while. This can continue without interruption, not building toward anything, not leading anywhere else, simply remaining present, steady, and unremarkable in a way that allows everything else to rest. There is no need to check whether this is working, no need to wonder how long it has been like this or how long it will last. Time can move on its own. Awareness can loosen without disappearing. Everything can remain just slightly out of focus without losing its place. For now, this is enough, not because it leads to something better, but because nothing else is required. And so the quiet continues, gently and without interruption, carrying everything forward at its own pace, without emphasis, without pause, without needing to be understood. For now, nothing needs to change, and nothing needs to be decided as this quiet continues in its own way, without asking anything of you, without expecting movement or progress, simply remaining as it is. There is no point you need to reach from here, no moment you need to notice or mark, only this steady sense of being supported, held in place by the night itself, without effort, without instruction. Rest doesn't have to deepen, and it doesn't have to stop. It can continue exactly like this, neither increasing nor fading, just unfolding gently, moment by moment, without direction. The body already understands this kind of rest. It settles into it without checking, without evaluating whether anything is happening the right way, allowing weight to distribute evenly, allowing breath to move in its own rhythm, slow or slower, without needing attention. Thoughts may still appear from time to time. They can pass through without being followed, without being completed, like distant movement that doesn't ask you to turn your head toward it. Nothing here needs to be carried forward. Nothing needs to be held in mind. The quiet doesn't require your participation. It doesn't need you to stay awake for it, and it doesn't mind if attention drifts, softens, or slips away for a while. This can continue without interruption, not building toward anything, not leading anywhere else, simply remaining present, steady, and unremarkable in a way that allows everything else to rest. There is no need to check whether this is working, no need to wonder how long it has been like this or how long it will last. Time can move on its own. Awareness can loosen without disappearing. Everything can remain just slightly out of focus without losing its place. For now, this is enough, not because it leads to something better, but because nothing else is required. And so the quiet continues gently and without interruption, carrying everything forward at its own pace, without emphasis, without pause, without needing to be understood. Nothing needs to shift from this place. The quiet does not ask to deepen, and it does not ask to resolve into anything else. It can remain like this, open and steady, allowing moments to pass without being counted or shaped into meaning. You don't have to stay with any particular sensation. You don't have to follow the rhythm of the breath or notice the weight of the body in any precise way. Those things are already happening, whether they are observed or not. The mind can soften its focus even more now, not by trying to relax, but simply by losing interest in holding things together. There is less need to check, less need to orient, less need to stay aware of where you are in this process. If attention drifts, it can drift without being called back. If it rests for a moment and then loosens again, that is fine too. Nothing depends on continuity here. This quiet does not belong to effort. It doesn't respond to control or intention. It continues because there is nothing interrupting it. Even the sense of being present can become less defined, not disappearing, just spreading out, becoming less centered on any one place or thought. And still everything remains supported. Nothing falls away, nothing is lost. This can go on gently and unremarkably, without change, without direction, without any need to understand what is happening or why it feels this way. Words can remain now without needing to point anywhere in particular, without asking to explain or describe what is happening, simply existing as sound, as rhythm, as something that passes through without leaving a mark. There is less need for language to carry meaning here, less need for it to connect one moment to the next. It can soften into something closer to a background presence, like distant sound that doesn't require attention in order to continue. Sound continues even when attention no longer follows it closely. It moves through awareness without asking to be tracked, without needing to be held in place or understood. Nothing is asking to be kept in mind. Nothing is asking to be remembered. Words can arrive and fade again, gently and without effort, not building toward anything, not leading anywhere else, just appearing for a moment and then dissolving back into the quiet that holds them. There is no need to listen carefully. There is no need to stay with each phrase. Language does not need to be used here. It does not need to be processed or interpreted. It can simply pass through like breath, like warmth, like the subtle sense of being present without focus. Awareness can remain open without settling on anything specific. It doesn't have to choose a thought or a sound to rest on. It can spread out instead, becoming less centered, less directed, less concerned with detail. The fewer words are asked to do, the more space there is around them. They begin to feel lighter, less defined, less important. Some phrases may seem to repeat themselves. Others may feel incomplete. That is not a problem. Repetition here does not serve meaning. It serves softness. It allows attention to drift without resistance, without needing to decide where to go next. You may notice that even the sense of listening begins to change. Not disappearing, but loosening, becoming less focused on content and more attuned to rhythm and pause. Words no longer need to arrive clearly. They do not need to be followed from beginning to end. They can blur slightly, overlap, or fade before they finish. Nothing is lost when that happens. The quiet underneath remains steady. It does not depend on clarity or understanding. It continues whether language is sharp or indistinct. Here, language becomes thin enough to pass through without effort. It no longer gathers attention. It no longer asks to be engaged with. It can stay, or it can drift, or it can dissolve into the background, and any of those is fine. This is not a transition to something else. There is no next step being prepared. The thinning of language does not lead anywhere. It simply allows the quiet to be felt more easily, without interruption, without demand, without needing words to hold it together. And as words continue in this lighter way, without weight and without purpose, awareness can rest more fully in what remains when nothing is being asked of it. Words can continue even when they are no longer clearly separated from the quiet around them. They don't need firm edges. They don't need to stand out. Language can become softer, almost translucent, allowing what lies beneath it to come forward without being named or pointed to. It can feel less like information and more like texture, something that moves through awareness without forming a shape that needs to be recognized. There is no need to stay with any particular phrase. If one fades before it finishes, nothing is interrupted. If another seems to repeat something already said, it doesn't add weight. Here, repetition does not build meaning. It simply smooths the space, making it easier for attention to loosen its grip and settle into something broader and less defined. The sound of words can blend with pauses, with silence, with the subtle background of the night. It all becomes part of the same continuous field, without clear boundaries. Even understanding language as language can soften now. Words may be heard without being processed. They may register only as tone or rhythm or gentle movement without turning into thoughts that need to be followed. Nothing needs to be clear. Nothing needs to be distinct. As language thins in this way, it no longer interrupts rest. It moves alongside it, lightly and without pressure, allowing the quiet underneath to remain steady and uninterrupted. And in that steadiness, attention can drift even further, unconcerned with what is being said, unconcerned with where it is going, resting instead in the simple fact that everything continues without needing words to guide it. There is no clear direction here now, no sense of moving towards something or away from anything else, only this gentle continuation that doesn't need to be followed or understood in order to remain. Breath moves without being noticed, rising and falling on its own, not asking to be slowed or deepened, not asking to be felt in any particular way, simply continuing as it always has. Time passes without needing to be counted. Moments do not line up into a sequence that matters. They appear and dissolve again, without marking where one ends and another begins. There is stillness here, without being still, movement without effort, awareness without a center. Nothing is guiding this experience. Nothing is directing attention or asking it to settle anywhere specific. There is no place you are meant to arrive. Sound may be present, or it may fade into the background. Either way, it doesn't require response. It doesn't ask to be followed from beginning to end. The sense of being someone listening can soften now, not disappearing, but loosening, becoming less defined, less tied to a single point of view. Thoughts may arise or they may not. If they do, they don't need to connect to each other. They don't need to form a line of reasoning or a story that continues. Each one can appear on its own and fade again without consequence. There is no task being completed here, no process being measured, no state that needs to be maintained. Even the idea of resting can lose its shape, not because rest has ended, but because it no longer needs to be named in order to continue. Everything can drift slightly now. Attention, sensation, the sense of time itself. Nothing needs to hold together. Nothing needs to stay consistent. What remains does so naturally, without direction, without intention, without any requirement to notice that it is remaining at all. This is not leading somewhere else. It is not preparing for what comes next. It is simply this open, unmarked stretch where experience continues on its own, without being organized or guided, allowing awareness to float without needing to know where it is or what it is doing. And in that absence of direction, nothing is missing, nothing needs to be added. Everything that is here is enough to let the night continue quietly and without interruption. There is no need for awareness to gather itself now. It doesn't have to know where it is resting, and it doesn't have to recognize when it drifts. Both happen without instruction. The sense of time can soften even further, becoming less like a line and more like a wide, open space, where moments no longer press against each other. Nothing arrives on schedule. Nothing leaves a trace. Breath continues somewhere in the background, not as something to follow, but as a quiet movement that doesn't need to be acknowledged in order to remain steady. It happens whether it is noticed or not. The idea of listening can fade in and out. Sometimes there is sound. Sometimes there is only the feeling of sound having passed. Neither state needs to be preferred. Attention does not have to stay awake to anything in particular. It can loosen its hold completely, allowing sensations to appear without being centered, without being gathered into a single experience. There is no edge to this moment that needs to be found, no boundary that needs to be crossed. Awareness can feel spread out now, less anchored, less located, as if it were no longer attached to a single place or point of reference. And even that doesn't need to be noticed for it to continue. Nothing is being watched closely. Nothing is being monitored. This absence of direction does not create emptiness. It creates space, a space where things can continue without being arranged. If something changes, it changes quietly. If nothing changes, that is fine too. There is no signal to wait for, no shift that needs to be confirmed. Everything can remain exactly as it is, drifting gently, without purpose, without destination, without needing to know that it is drifting at all. And so this quiet remains, without needing to change or move in any particular direction, continuing gently, steadily, without effort and without emphasis, as if it has always been here and will continue whether it is noticed or not. Nothing concludes here. Nothing reaches an ending point. There is no moment that needs to be marked as the last one. No signal that something has finished or resolved. This is simply a continuation, calm and unremarkable, carrying everything forward without asking anything in return. Awareness can stay or it can drift. It can fade slightly or spread out or rest without definition. Any of those is enough. The sense of time no longer needs to move in steps. It doesn't need to progress or arrive anywhere. It can remain open, unmeasured, allowing moments to pass without shape or order. Breath continues somewhere in the background, steady and unforced, not asking to be followed, not asking to be noticed, simply happening as it always does. The body remains supported, held quietly in place without needing to adjust or respond. There is nothing to watch for now, nothing to wait on. If sound is present, it can pass through without being registered. If silence appears, it does not need to be filled. Both are part of the same uninterrupted flow. The quiet does not deepen or fade away. It simply remains. Even the idea of remaining can soften here, becoming less distinct, less tied to language or thought, more like a background that does not require attention to exist. Nothing needs to be remembered from this moment. Nothing needs to be taken from it. There is no reason to stay awake for what is happening. There is no reason to follow the words as they continue. They can pass by gently and evenly, like a current that does not need to be seen in order to carry everything along. And so this continues, without pause, without boundary, without a point where it becomes something else. There is no edge to reach, no ending to arrive at, only this quiet continuation, holding everything exactly as it is, moving forward at its own pace, without interruption, without conclusion, without any need to be understood. There is nothing else you need to do. Sometimes peace is not something we must learn. It is something we remember. The world pulls us outward, toward goals, toward noise, toward endless motion. But when the heart grows quiet, we begin to sense a deeper rhythm beneath it all, a rhythm that has always been waiting, softly calling us home. This quiet home lives inside you, but it can be easy to forget. That is why Gassho exists, not to add anything new, but to help you return. A space built for stillness, for reflection, for the gentle work of being. In its name, Gassho, there is a gesture, two hands meeting in respect and gratitude, a gesture of unity between self and world, between heart and breath, between sound and silence. When you open the Gassho app, you are not entering another screen. You are stepping into a small temple that travels with you, a place where you can sit without expectation, breathe without demand, and listen without effort. Inside you will find guided meditations, stories inspired by Buddhist wisdom, and the steady presence of sutras, not as lessons, but as companions. The sound you are about to hear is one of those companions, a sound carried through generations, a sound shaped by breath, devotion, and time. You do not need to understand the words. You do not need to follow the rhythm. You do not need to stay awake for it. Let the sound arrive as it is. Let it move through awareness without resistance. Let it remain even as attention fades. There is nothing left to do, only to rest. Let the breath settle. Let the body sink, and simply listen. The sound of the sutra continues, offered from a temple in the quiet mountains of Koyasan, shared here through the Gassho app whenever you wish to return to silence.
Gassho